What is up, IT friends? It is another spicy Monday. And today, I'm going to keep this one brief. I don't normally talk about technical subjects because honestly, I don't know my ass from my elbow when it comes to most of the things that you smart people do for a living. But I want to talk a little bit about today about backups and how disappointed I am with MSPs in general that it's 2024 and y'all still don't have your shit together. What's up? This is Editor Dean. Just wanted to pop in and warn anybody watching this that I really get aggravated about this subject of backups. So there will be definitely some sailor level profanity in this. And while I've got you here, besides backups being super important, have DNS policies in place too. I was reminded when I put on my shirt today from OpenDNS. I don't care what vendor you use, just use something. All right, back to the video. So March 31st was World Backup Day. And to some people, I suppose it was also Easter. And I did backups and bandwidth on Friday with Ninja, and saw a bunch of posts last week that were just backup related on Reddit, and both things combined reminded me of the fact, and by the way, Ninja made a really cool tome of backups guide that you read through it, and to me, 90% of this is common fucking sense. But then I switch over to actually talking to those of you that know more than me that do this for a living, and holy shit, no one's doing this right. And I don't get that. So that's a great guide, by the way. You should totally download it. Besides being technically accurate, their graphics team did a really nice job making it look like an actual D&D material from the 70s. So that was pretty cool. But all right, what really got me going here was I see all these posts all the time, people on Reddit looking for new backup solutions, and that's fine. I mean, I've done videos before criticizing y'all for going to social media to source tools. Whatever, we're not here to be made fun of for that today. And folks will come in with their lists of what the product has to do or what the product can't do, and a lot of these lists are stupid, but once again, not what we're here for. What I don't understand is when I will see the feedback posted. So people will go in and they will offer up different backup vendors as suggestions, and there are a lot of them. And then people will add feedback on why they like or why they don't like backup vendors. And almost all of the feedback I see is the dumbest shit on the face of the planet. And what I mean by that is almost all of you seem to like or not like a backup vendor based on how much you can ignore the product once you install it. And to think about that logically from an MSP standpoint, first of all, if that's your value proposition, that I want a backup product that I can set and forget and never touch, fire your staff, sell your business right now. You're a dumpster fire. You don't deserve to be in business. Go away. Because I'm sorry. Like everything else we do as an MSP, if you want to spin all of that back, if you want to put the fucking bloomin' onion back together and get back to the middle of it, it's managed backups. That's where this industry started. That's the point of this industry. That's all the first MSPs that were selling copiers and then started selling, old Zenith boxes in the early 2000s. That is where this industry comes from. So I would argue now, 24 years later, y'all should have your shit together. This should be pretty basic. What is going on? This idea that the value of a backup product is somehow tied to how noisy it is, in that the less noisy the product is, in other words, the less alerting it does, the less I have to touch it, the less I have to know about it, the better it is the dumbest fucking value proposition I have ever heard around a single tool in this space, full stop. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, what you don't understand, Dean, absolutely not. Shut up. You're an idiot. Guys, come on. I understand that OG Datto was such a great product. It caused many of you to feel this idea that a backup provider should give you software and hardware that work together and require minimal interaction. I understand that set a standard in a lot of your heads. But first of all, I'm here to say they weren't really right about that, and it's not that great of a product because none of them are. They all need human interaction. And secondly, even if we do say they were the best at doing that, you guys understand that, like, that's not a value proposition you should be pushing forward for backups in general. You should be checking them. And I see this freaking everywhere. You want a great example? How many of you have a policy where you no longer back up workstations whatsoever because all critical data needs to be on the server or in OneDrive or Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever your file sharing thing is? And you proudly say, I have set up policies to make sure that all user data is saved in those locations, and therefore I no longer back up local machines. Bet that's a lot of you. And I bet you all think you're pretty smart and pretty smug for doing that. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're all pretty fucking dumb. Because here's the thing. Users don't care what policies you set. They're going to save stuff wherever they want. And you know what's going to end up happening? When you have policies like that, I guarantee you're not sitting down and having recurring meetings to double check RPO and RTO and make sure it actually covers the data the users think they're saving. So even if your policies are fantastic and the users can only save in the places you think they can save, I bet not all your users are on the same page as you, which makes your backups garbage. And that's the part that really gets me going here. It's like saying I have installed a fire suppression system on all the buildings that matter. Hooray! What about the rest of them? Because guess where the fire that's going to burn the place down is going to start? Not under a sprinkler. It's going to be under something you didn't think mattered that did burn down, which is why you can't have that kind of attitude to backups. I don't get it. You need to be approaching all of your backups from a position of RPO and RTO. And if you don't know what those two terms mean, you need to learn them, because I guarantee, even if you have the best backup solution on the planet, it probably isn't doing either one of those things the way you think it is. And that's probably why a lot of the hate I see around a lot of backup products gets thrown out there. And spoiler alert, it's not that you bought a shitty piece of backup software, you're just a shitty MSP that implemented the backup software poorly. Yes, even the crappy backup software can generate decent backups if you have a proper RTO and RPO. An RPO, recovery point objective. Where in time do you need to be able to recover data from? And an RPO isn't a static decision that you make at the beginning of the contract with your MSP client and don't talk about ever again. You need to have it in a documented policy that specifically outlines what the recovery point objective is for their business data, for their user data, for their Office 365 data, for all the different areas that your end users are thinking, my MSP is backing up. And you need to remind them of that and talk about it on a recurring basis, ideally at your TBRs. You have to. You can't not be doing that. And here's why you can't not be doing that, because none of you have your act together well enough to make up for not doing that. Like, I'm not talking about the client right now. And the hell with the client? Like, you, MSPs, none of you are operationally mature enough where you can afford to ignore having that conversation. You need to be doing it, because what you need to then do is go back to your teams after you've had this meeting and then go in your mind, oh shit, are we actually doing this? And then go have your teams verify that you're actually doing this, because I guarantee you're not actually doing it everywhere. No one is. I wasn't. No one is. And if you're not checking it repeatedly, it's not something your technical team has in their head that they need to check repeatedly. And then we have RTO. And this is the one. RTO is the one that typically leads to the unfucking, because RTO, recovery time objective, that's the one we all sweep under the freaking table because we buy products that are full BCDR products with the hardware on site that have virtualization, and we're just like, hey there, I've got a virtual appliance on site, so I can spin you up in no time, client. But that's horseshit, because no, you can't. Because first of all, have you ever tested it under load? I bet you haven't. Seriously, I bet you haven't. Don't fucking lie to me and be like, oh, yes, we do DR test restores on a quarterly basis. No, you don't. You probably open up a canary file and take a screenshot. How many of you have actually coordinated with your client for them to have a loss of business time for you to do a DR test? Probably no one, because that's an incredibly challenging conversation to have. So given the fact that you objectively don't test this, you absolutely need to know what your RTO is in real life, not in marketing wank. And if you can't communicate that properly, my friend, you are doomed to fail no matter what else you have done. So let's talk a little bit more about RTO for a second. Recovery Time Objective. This is one of those ones that everybody superficially understands, but no one ever takes a minute to actually think about what it means in practice, because it has nothing to do with the backups. So your RTO is how quickly you are going to be able to recover the client to whatever state you've agreed to in the RTO policy. There's your first fail point. How many of you have left that undefined? So if I went and called your client right now, your client would think RTO equals complete business continuity, because that's not what that means, but I bet your client thinks that. If a client had a critical bit of data that you said that you could recover within an hour or 2 hours or a day, does that mean make the data available again or fully restore the environment to production? Probably for most of us, it means make the data available again, because that is usually, not always, we'll come back to this in a second, relatively quick to do in the modern age. It doesn't mean that it's bootable or usable or readable or ingestible. What if they have transaction logs that have updated since the last time, you had a backup? You need to be able to test this stuff in real life and not just pull a bullshit number out of your ass based on what your vendor claimed was possible under ideal conditions. And that brings me back to what I mentioned a minute ago, ideal conditions. I don't know about you, but not many small businesses are on the modern day equivalent of a bonded T1. Most of them do not have better than gig internet. And in fact, a lot of them don't really have great quality internal networks. Guess what the weakest link in your RTO policy is? How fast you can get the fucking data back on site. You think of that? So if all your shit's off in a cloud because you're a cloud-friendly MSP that doesn't keep anything on site, which is, just shut the fuck up if you're one of the people who are saying that at this point too. Because enough with all the marketing horse shit. But if all the data's off site, you gotta get it on site. Most of our clients don't have a download and upload that can be, even if solely dedicated, is capable of making that transfer in a reasonable time frame. And generally, it can't be solely dedicated because of the traffic there. So first of all, you need a way to get the data from point A to point B. And even if it's inside the network, that's not instantaneous, folks. It still takes time to transfer it. Then you need somewhere to put it. And I know a lot of you are going to say, oh, I have a BDR appliance or, BCDR hardware on site. Yeah, but do you really? Because a lot of the ones that come with the companies that provide them, the hardware is pretty shitty. It's not fast. It works, but it's not that great. And a lot of you that self-roll your hardware, and we were one of these people, this is the pot calling the kettle black. The hardware wasn't as shitty, but it was old. And I definitely wasn't running the same level of quality maintenance on the BDR that I was on the other servers. Those things are on an 11-year refresh policy. They had extended warranties up the wazoo. When's the last time I made sure that every bit of the hardware in there had been dusted off? It's not a thing most of us tend to do. And so then you're trying to go in. How many of you have actually figured out my entire client's full loaded production environment? What would that take to be bare minimum usable on a virtualized appliance? I bet most of you haven't, because most of us don't. We go in, we look at the general hardware specs the client currently has, We pick a BDR appliance that is roughly capable of running that. And we're sort of like, whatever, if it burns down, they'll have bigger problems. And that's about as much thought as we ever put into it. But the production environment's dynamic. Well, the BDR isn't. You guys think about this? Anybody think about the fact that you might have good backup software? You might actually be checking your backups. You might be doing all of those things. You might be doing test restores, all the stuff I accused everybody in this video of doing. But if you haven't actually gone in and realistically set expectations on how long it'll actually take you to get all that data identified, copied, restored, booted up, cut over so that that device is now in production, and you've done this outside of a lab environment where you're just like, hey, look how fast I can spin up a test workstation. I'm so cool. Like, how many of you actually do that? How many of you have actually gone into your client and said, client, you have spent all this money on this technology, but still it's going to take at least 24 hours for us to get you back up to a working position. So step one of your IR plan is send everybody home and close for the day so you don't lose wages. How is any of that conversation the fault of the backup software? That's you. That's your fault. Do better, MSPs. So, I know I yelled at you a lot. It's a really aggravating concept because fundamentally this isn't hard. And it's one of the first things most of you will throw stones about. When you see someone else stumble, one of the first, oh, did they have backups? Oh, were they doing this? That peasant MSP, they're not doing these things. None of you are. None of you are. Seriously, I challenge somebody to prove to me that you are actually treating your backups as appropriately and as seriously and with the level of maturity that you should be able to trip over after 20 years of doing this as a service. I don't really know anybody that can really look me in the eye and genuinely tell me they have their shit together in this area. And I don't get it. Do better. It's not the backup software vendor's fault. Any of them, even the bad ones. It's your fault. Have a great spicy Monday. Stop fucking up your backups.